So at the outset, I want to thank you, Murli, Durai, Rajshekar sir, for the opportunity. Um, I have thought through some of the points that were briefed to me in terms of AI, agentic AI, adoption of it, and relevance of it to the banking sector, if not other sectors. So I'll try and do justice to this subject over the next 45 to 60 minutes. Would request we keep it interactive. You can have some dialogue discussion during or towards the end, however you want. And maybe there's a 15-20 minute buffer. In terms of topics, this is what I have lined up for somewhere between 45 to 60 minutes. First is some introductions. I'll share my background, what I've been doing, etc. And hopefully try to share what is generally public information around that with all of you. Then some learnings I've had in AI, data, and the cloud, more so focused on AI and its relevance or impact on business relevance, so to speak. I'll share some thoughts about that. It's always important to look at the sectors, which industries are adopting the technology, in what format, how fast, how slow, etc. So there's a few charts on that macro level view, and maybe you can draw inferences from that in terms of your own line of specialization. The probably most important aspect when it comes to this subject, be it AI, Gen AI, data science, I would argue even cloud, is about the human capital, potential, learning, capability, talent, and depending on where you are at which stage of your career, entry level, mid path, or latter part, how you need to unlearn a few things and learn a few new things in substitution of that. So I think the talent and capability building want to touch upon. Time permitting, we'll also look at the nature of the market. Every day is very different these days, and I personally, as a professional, sometimes feel very paranoid that whatever has brought me here till today is not enough to even sustain me tomorrow. It is that kind of world we are living in. So why is it so volatile? What is the churn all about, and what are the implications? We'll reflect on that and then some Q&A. So that's the way I've structured it. If there are any questions that are not within this, feel free to shoot. If I have the answers, I'll share. If I don't, I'll do my homework and come back. So firstly, my own journey, which I'll take 3 to 4 minutes on. I was with TCS till recently. I was there for 35 years. So I joined in 1990 when state of the art was mainframe. And over the years, or decades rather, I've seen an evolution, if not a revolution, in terms of how technology has become very fundamental to how businesses exist today. I think if I reflect on the last 3.5 decades, the first decade or so was businesses consuming technology. So I vividly remember, if you take the Indian banking context, so to speak, the whole era of computerization, MIS, and those sort of words were used, where just the physical act of procuring a server or a computer was in itself an advance in technology. Business was primary, technology was secondary, and as an optional extra, you could procure technology to become a little more modern or efficient or whatever. Today, and you can look at the startup ecosystem, it is inconceivable that you can start a business without a technology aid. And that could be spinning up a VM on a cloud or having some kind of a model, LLM in today's parlance to consume and so on. So the gap or the swing of the pendulum that we are witnessing is businesses being consumers of technology to, I would argue, technology is powering businesses today. Besides there being the business of technology itself, where hundreds of billions of dollars are being poured. I think this has all happened in our own lifetime, under our own watch. And it still is early days. So there is still a lot more to happen. So I've had the benefit of therefore working on multiple technology stacks, each one at that point in time being the latest and greatest. And each one saying that now that we have arrived, from now on it will be only this, only to be replaced by something else the following quarter or year. And today's world is no different. I think it will continue. So that's the first point I wanted to make. All the rage right now is still around cloud, data, and AI, with quantum starting to make the right noises of late. but commercially viable mass market adoption yet to take off, but something to keep an eye on. But cloud, thanks to what AWS put out there, I think back in 2006, 7, 8, that era, was probably the start of a business where elastic computing, on-demand computing, computing by consumption being the metering concept, all took off. Now there are 3 hyperscalers. There are more cloud providers than ever before. There is a notion of sovereign private cloud and so on and so forth. While cloud has taken off, edge computing is equally relevant and applicable in certain contexts. So if I were to sum the second bullet, it would be that computing seems to be democratized today. Entry barriers are low, very little friction. Any consumer, not necessarily an institution or a customer or a brand like yourselves, but even people starting their schooling, so to speak, have access to a device in some form factor. So the ubiquity of all of it is what is astonishing. And equal and accompanying the ubiquity, especially too in India, is the absolute optimal rates at which you can procure all of this. It doesn't call for a huge capex investment at all anymore. In fact, arguably you can pay as you go, and that's quite a miracle that we are seeing. We take it for granted. The technology state of play, however, is a journey in its infancy still. They are already talking of data centers in space. There is the whole notion of quantum, like I said earlier. As and when these advances are happening, there is enormous emphasis on frugality. What is economics of computing? Don't get carried away by all of these tools. At the end of the day, how much are you actually paying as a cost of your cost of doing business, so to speak? Reliability, safety, security, privacy, they are always top topics. Unfortunately or fortunately, these state-of-the-art technologies and stacks are being used by actors who don't have good intentions. So to provide a counter is literally a cat and mouse game. You have to be one step ahead. And that sophistication comes at a price. One from a cleverness point of view, second from a price to pay point of view. So you have to balance that. Thirdly, thanks to at least the current avatar of AI, large language models, etc., knowledge is truly available at fingertips, if not intelligence. So the notion of what a career path in technology is, what do academic degrees have to offer anymore, or how will they evolve to offer something better? Good old human virtues like curiosity, inquisitiveness, problem solving, knowing which tool to use or configure in what combination for what business problem. And since business and technology are but one, they seem to be 2 strands of the same DNA. Business wants everything yesterday, whereas technologies promise everything tomorrow or 2 quarters from now. So how do you reconcile that speed mismatch? How do you get rid of that impedance? I think those are some of the things to consider because it is all getting very blurry and very intro. Having said that, I guess most of you would be technologists with affinity to business, with maybe a few business people on this call. End of the day, business domain remains key. It may be the most elegant piece of software you code, the best comprehensive test pack you have written, or the architecture can be fantastic, can have concurrency, multi-threading, handle this kind of volume and load and stress, etc. But if it doesn't impact cash flow or margin or realization or some business metric or some consumer metric, say NPS scores, it is of no use. It is just a fancy toy. So in my own career, I've been very guilty of getting carried away by the glamour of the tool chain. Look what I did in client server. Look how Python is superior to this language. But end of the day, it is a building that matters, not the cement or the brick. Though they are equally important. But there's always a difference between the finished product, the recipe, and the ingredients. So getting carried away by the ingredients is never a good idea, while important. So business domain still remains key. And I think for all professionals, all companies, articulating the understanding of a business problem or a customer need, the ability to play it back, the ability to devise a solution that is very say faster, cheaper, better to address that need, and then the technology to go ahead, doing that implementation. That has to be the pecking order, not the opposite way. So those are some of the thoughts in terms of introductions, and I carry enough lessons and scars in all of these dimensions. So it's not like there's a syllabus, but more an experience sharing. So moving on, what are the trends that we are seeing in the topic of today, AI? AI is a broad sweep of the brush. You can consider it for purposes of today's discussion to include what you might call as traditional AI. It could include good old SQL, analytics, and so on and so forth, data science components, and of course the current avatar, which is generative AI based, with more to come. A lot of discussion, debate is still going on. So all of that in one composite AI is what we're trying to do. So what are the trends that we are seeing? And this you could say is current as of say December of last year, December 25, and it is based on some of what has transpired between the year 2023 till date. That's kind of summary. Now, some of you may relate to this. You may have played a role in doing some of this. Some of you may have read up on this, and therefore bear with me if there's some repeat or what's going on. The first thing is pilots to production. I think as much as it has caught the attention of everybody from the ChatGPT days, OpenAI, and it is now available relatively free or low cost on your smartphones. The truth is there is a lot more of singleton use case and a lot more of smaller projects that are happening rather than a large scale enterprise transformation completely leveraging. Now, various reasons are there for it, but the emphasis therefore now is enough of the pilots. We need more of large scale enterprise mainstream production deployments. So you will find a lot of literature on how big can we go, how can we transform entire departments if not companies, how can you move away from just piecemeal workflows and use cases, how can you do what we used to call enterprise transformation or business process reengineering or things like that. That is a constant pulse. Now, what is the driver for that? The driver or the reason for that is a lot of the technology companies, namely the model owners, the hyperscalers, have positioned it extremely well. In fact, I think it was an act of genius that ChatGPT was launched not through the enterprise channel, but through the consumer channel. By just throwing it across the fence on November, December, suddenly you got more than 1 million views and likes or curious people using it, which is far more than what it would have taken to sell it to a fraction of those very million consumers in the enterprise route. So I think a great marketing lesson in how to tease out excitement there. But the flip side obviously is therefore now boards have caught the attention of all of this. They are directing their C-suite as to how can you do faster moves here. There's a lot of the headlines we read about the hundreds of billions of dollars of investment going into AI data centers, infrastructures, procurement of GPUs, etc. So end of the day, as the line goes, it's all about therefore show me the money. Right? Where is the ROI? How is the TCO going down, and what are you doing? So I think that will be all the focus for the foreseeable future. Till obviously it becomes as mainstream as it gets from a balance sheet point of view. That's the first point. Second one is what we sometimes call combinatorial. Right? Combinatorial is we can't pretend that Gen AI will give you the silver bullet to all the problems that your customers have or the planet has. It has a certain approach which sometimes is called probabilistic. That word you will see in a few charts down the road also. Therefore, it is not in the true computational sense deterministic where it gives you a 0 or a 1 all the time, consistently, reliably and accurately. It has a certain way of coming within a certain limit of options. And sometimes it even strays those limits, which we tend to call hallucinations. Now, more than get into a debate on is this a bug, is it a feature, etc., it's better to say this is the way it is. This is how the model currently exists and operates. And therefore, what is the scaffolding or the guardrails or the other support structures you can build, including the famous phrase humans in the loop. to make sure that you exploit it for what it is good at, and you know how to deal with what it might not be good at. But don't lose of the sight that somewhere behind the scenes you still have a good old file IO, you have an SQL, you still have in many, many institutions worldwide hierarchical and networked data schemas. And you still have a lot of unstructured data sets to contend with. And therefore, there are various access routines to intelligently snuff out the data and combine it and make sense of it, right? So, how do you get a combination of good old, reliable, proven, over the years evolved methods, and what is a little bit state of the art and therefore not as much classical as the past, and combine it together for your business use? So that word combinatorial, I think, is going to be here to stay. Vertical is because a lot of the ways in which the models have been trained, whichever are the latest avatars of the LLMs and so on, there is an opportunity for institutions to look at a narrower, smaller, verticalized way of doing the training of your work. And by the way, since there might be contention on sovereignty and too much of openness of some of the models, behind some firewall in your own private data center, how do you create these vertical instances? So one, you have a narrower model which might be fit for purpose for the workflows and other things that you cater to, and the closeness to your own self, so that it is not going to be privacy and the security and the sovereign risk. And therefore, small models come into play there. That is showing a lot of promise. In fact, smaller models where you have a lot more industry and business process focus, by nature, therefore, don't need so much of compute resources. And therefore, it might be from a frugality point of view, a more economical, fit for purpose way to go about. So I think that is the second point that a lot of people are talking about. I already dwelt on the third one. If algorithms can't be accountable, indeed, if AI can't, and some human has to sign off at the end of the day, some document of record, then what checks and balances are you going to put in from a governance perspective, from an audit risk standpoint, so that the individual or the people who actually attest to the veracity of all of this have traceability at the end of to the result set that it is spitting out. Now, this is starting to also become much more relevant of late because of the different climates in which various sovereign institutions are operating worldwide. Every country wants its own stamp on what you might call as computationally sovereign infrastructure. So it is inevitable, I think, that a lot of companies will have to accede to those institutional asks, and therefore, in tandem with the accountability needs that are there, you will have to look into this. Consumer to enterprise is what I dwelt on earlier. Chances are everybody in your family, youngsters, school-going children, if not college, already have access to AI. It is inevitably getting built into the browser. It is part of the operating system, so to speak. So there is no getting away from it. But that being the familiarity, how do you take that same familiarity to the enterprise level? So developer communities, business people, how do you weave it into all aspects of what you do? So one lesson I learned very early on is if you need to do anything twice, you may as well automate it, because the second instance, and therefore many more after that, will be that much more efficient. So automation is not to be seen as a bolt-on. It is to be seen as a automation first mindset, so to speak. Now, it may sound cliched, but AI first mindset has to be the way, because this technology is not here to fade away or evaporate tomorrow morning. It is going to evolve and become much more reliable, enterprise grade, and so on. So why delay the inevitable? Take to it and figure out how to use it. So a lot of the icons you will see in this presentation are from thanks to Copilot. 5 months ago, 1 year ago, of course, if you have a team, you can rely on them. But if you are an individual, you will scout through, you will try and figure out from where to put the picture, etc. Or use your own pictures if you have any. Now it is under a license that Copilot provides you. So weaving it, however, I have to think with that mindset, right? I can't go finishing everything and give it to somebody and say, can you AI-fy it for me? That bolt-on approach is always suboptimal because it shows that you still think of it as an outsider and not somebody with whom you can collaborate. So I think that consumer to enterprise transition happens when you accept it as an insider, you accept it as a companion, a co-pilot, or whatever else you want to call it, a co-worker, and look at it as an extension of your own cognition rather than as an interruption in the way you think. And that is mindset. Personally, I find it very challenging because I'm a product of having started my career in the 90s. So manual first is the approach, not tool first. So there is a certain amount of unlearning to do, which means you lose your memory and muscle and all that, and you have to rebuild it. And I think that has to be, however, advocated and practiced. There is no getting away from it. Otherwise, a new kid on the block who is born into AI first as a generation will naturally overtake you. So I like this example of you patiently wait at a red light, waiting for it to turn green. It so happens somebody 1 mile behind you is at 60 kmph, if they allow it speed here. And it's a coincidence that it turns green when they're nearing the signal. And all your waiting is useless because they were at the right place at the right time. So it is with AI. You're born into AI, you use it, and then you are waiting to learn it and adopt it. There's a new kid on the block waiting to overtake you all the time. So that's something to be very conscious about and cognizant about. Yes. There is this famous 4-letter acronym FOMO, fear of missing out. So there is this fear of missing out paranoia where everyone knows that you have to quickly tune into this phenomenon. And that is what is driving infinite number of pilots for sure. Because boards and the C-suite and the leadership are very aware of what is going on in the valley or hotspots of the world. But there's a propagation latency. From there, it has to propagate down to every worker, so to speak, right, in the chain. And how you rapidly propagate that and kill the inertia and encourage a culture of learning and adoption is very, very important. That's the last segment of this presentation, actually. It also involves, since you brought up the subject, inevitably doing a refresher course to the extent possible on basic statistics and math, basic data science and probability, a little bit of getting comfortable again with curve fitting, how you predict stuff algorithmically. I mean, not saying go to, say, Chennai Mathematical Institute, get a PhD, not that kind. You get acquainted all over again. Get into programming. Python is much favored now. But thanks to Claude, especially the last 4 weeks, it seems to be that much more easier to get into programming than ever before. So get into an abstraction of programming, if not actual programming. Just like we don't code in assembly language anymore. Get into some level, some avatar of how to program. Be comfortable with at least 3 things from a layered perspective in computing. What is the data layer? What is the business layer? What is the presentation layer? I think these are all things that are back to basics and everybody has to undergo now. Business and domain and functional people have to undergo it to relate to the lingo that technologists will speak. Technologists have to undergo it to relate to how to then assemble it and convey it to business. And there has to be a handshake. And it is not easy because over 30 years, people have gotten very specialized. The business layer doesn't know the presentation layer. Presentation doesn't know the data layer. The 3 together sometimes do not relate to the business need in any case. So I think there is a reset moment going on, and it's an opportunity to take advantage of it. So that's where the consumer to enterprise transition also helps. AI infrastructure is a very interesting space. Obviously, the likes of NVIDIA are the talk of the town. One is their stock performance. The other is the ubiquity and the near monopoly they have on the GPU and the parallel compute. And there are a few other players emerging. But keep that aside, the fact is that today's avatar of Gen AI is not anything else, is compute intensive, if not power hungry. So I had a beautiful conversation with Sir on the way here. At the end of the day, the econometrics of how you provide a solution to an enterprise is very important. So you could call it ROI, the window of ROI. You can call it the window of debt before you start seeing return. These are not just economic considerations or considerations to do with ROI. There are also elegance of architecture considerations. So agnostic of AI and everything that you see, good old fashioned asks of computational architecture, scalability, reliability, accessibility, security, how it handles load, volume, stress, concurrency. If you have only one peak season a year for 3 days, why do you design for 365 days with copious volumes of storage and CPUs? Where you live in a world where a bill of material is also provisioned on demand and you can pay. Maybe you pay a premium for those 3 days, but it still evens out. So I think that line of systems thinking, holistic thinking, and architectural led ways of thinking have to come in as well. So that discipline is not going to go away. On the contrary, because programming and a few other things could get instrumented through AI models, probably those fields will gain even more importance than ever before. So AI infrastructure is therefore a key thing. The notion of agency being given to AI, and therefore AI agentic architectures coming in, is absolutely something that is taking off. It's been there for 12 months, if not more. It'll get hotter and more prolific this year. But how do you draw the line of division between what you use it for and what you do not use it for? And in the event you use it for something, what are those things that can go wrong? And how do you define the policing interventions? And what is the fail-safe, the rollback, and the restore mechanisms thereon? I think those have to be thought through. That's an emerging field. But the co-play is here to stay. At the most preliminary or elementary level, the act of office work, your mails, your calendaring, I'm sure this meeting could get auto-transcribed and some human will look at it to see if it's overall okay or not. So, that's a saving street. No one's busy taking notes right now. So those things will be there, and those are, I would say, bottom of the pyramid gains, inevitable in any new technology advance. But sophistication, middle and higher end of the pyramid, the gains you have to see. And autonomy to agency is therefore the important point there. It's nice to say everything will be on autopilot until the first episode, the first incident, or the first catastrophe. So rules around that. Agency is the word which is the rage right now. But are we absolutely sure that we can entrust decision making and assigning responsibility for a task to something, even while accountability still remains with us? I think that's some big number question to be asked, and it's not there yet. It will evolve. So apart from this, in the fine print, a lot of other things, security, like we talked about, risk management, physical AI, we will not dwell in deep today, but obviously robotic technology and the notion of the LLMs being a brain for physical robotic stuff, it's starting to gain the fancy for currency. AI-enabled engineering, so advances in assembly line technology where finished produce can be inspected thanks to advances in generative AI and so on. That is the research, if not pure play scientific research, and I think there's a lot of papers now starting to get published using AI, but even clinical trials and drug discovery, like Google DeepMind, Isomorphic Labs is starting to do in the UK. I think that is going to happen inevitably. Education is a very interesting space. Where do you draw the line between data, knowledge, wisdom, experience, intelligence, and a few other philosophical words? And what gets imparted in education to the current generation of people joining school stream or university stream? What is the significance and what will be the changes in a university or a college degree? Or what part of that degree may not be required because you have other means to acquire it? These are interesting subjects that are starting to emerge. So it's a very interesting time to be alive, as they say. There is, for a lot of us who are very curious and inquisitive and excited by change, this is like kids in a candy store. There is so much to play around with. For anybody who desires only stability and is very uncomfortable with anything other than inertia, it's a very scary time, because this is the tsunami moment where the wave has receded and it is very calm. It appears it will remain calm forever, but the wave will come inevitably. So I think that's the moment we are all at, and each of us has to define our own plans, right? Personally or professionally around it. So the impact on business, I think probably I'm trailing on time, so I'll keep a check on clock. See, there are paradigm shifts to contemplate rather than worry about a Python or which model to use, or is it a language model or a visual model. Keep all that aside. Since they often refer to this as an electricity moment. And we know how electricity is, to put it oversimplistically, converted night to day across the world. It has made what was an 8-hour or a 12-hour day, now a 24-hour day worldwide. If you want to look at it very conveniently. Likewise, this phenomenon is, I think, more the DNA of a new marketplace, where a different way of transacting commerce, culture, societal interactions, marketplace interactions are inevitable. And we don't know the possibilities because the genie has just come out of the bottle. So we still don't know. Few things came to mind. One is, rather than think incremental, how much more efficiency gain, productivity gain can I gain this year or next year? You have to reimagine ground up, since probably amongst what you do, banking is important. What will lending look like in an agentic AI world? It's just like what prompted the gentleman who created Uber to imagine what would hailing a traffic or a cab look like in a triangulated GPS satellite smartphone world, where the old ways of how you do it go away. So I read this quote, I hope I'm correct in reproducing it, where I think Mr. Ford said when they started rolling out cars, if I ask the customer what they want, they will say they want a faster horse. Because if you predicate your future on what you have in the present, then you're only going to extrapolate or amplify or magnify. But you operate from an origin which is very constrained. And therefore, you will create a larger version of that constraint. So ground up reimagination is something very different. If I, for example, take claim settlement, we'll talk about some examples. Straight through processing in claims has been a word talked about a lot. And thanks to the cognitive abilities, the visual cognitive abilities of Gen AI, the fact that you can capture at the site of a damage or an incident or an accident what exactly the damage is and relay it real time thanks to a high speed network to a surveyor or an adjuster sitting somewhere with a pre-filled assessment of the damage, thanks to the fact the model has been trained on what damage really looks like and what not so big a damage looks like. You are now allowing for a faster decision making prompt from the user, which means genuine, authentic claims you can settle near real time. And we all know for an insurer, claims is the real face of the company to a claimant, to a person who pays the premium. So your loyalty, your retention, and of course your satisfaction scores go up exponentially. But you got to reimagine therefore what the claims assessment looks like. And that is just one very trivial, common known example. So moving away from incremental benefits to wholesale exponential gains by completely reimagining how an end customer can be served by a corporation. Customer can be another business in a B2B model. It can be an individual consumer in a B2C model. I think that has to be thought through. To reinforce my point on the first slide, the business domain knowledge is important. Just because you have access to a few tools and you can get programming done fast, you can't do away with the fact that claims dissatisfaction or your net promoter score being low or your ability to retain a loyal customer being low, renewals don't come through. Unless you have that insight, you cannot have the will or move away from the inertia to reimagine your claims processes. So that is the first thing. Second is humans leading the computer. I think humans teaming with the computer is inevitable. It's a mindset change. It can begin with your day-to-day workflow processes, mail, PowerPoint, Word, Excel, or the equivalent, whatever you have. I think it goes without saying when it comes to things like mails and other things, we are drowning in a lot of noise. It's so difficult to pick out the signal. So at least using it to signal, summarize, give you a decent impression of what the traffic looks like before you double click, and it's some productivity gain. Is it 10 minutes a day? Is it 2 minutes a day? I don't know. You'll have to figure out. But certainly teaming up with AI is therefore important. What does humans and AI teaming amongst teams of humans mean? We'll have to wait and see. But the early signs are there. For example, on Sunday, I was playing around with Canva. So Canva, like other tools, allows you to co-create pictures and posters and all that, right? It's groupware. And it has AI behind the scenes. So now here's a bunch of humans, each of them with their AI engines, together now teaming up. What are the possibilities? Since I've not experimented, I don't have first-hand experience. But if a few of you are preparing for some deck next Friday to some customer, why not get onto a groupware with AI and figure out? So it doesn't need to be pairs of humans and AIs alone. It can be pairs of that group together as well. So interesting possibilities. Compliance and governance, I think it will not fundamentally change, but I think we all have to be very conscious of the fact that mal actors have equal access to the state-of-the-art in tech. So the challenge for information professionals, and that means security, cyber security, people who architect, design, code, test, deploy, release, is about worrying that much more about being on a battlefield where the opposition now has equally effective, if not more sophisticated weapons than what you have. And that is a significantly important design consideration to worry about. So, like I said earlier, whether you call it validation, verification, or testing, or governance, or compliance, or risk audit, whatever, it is absolutely not okay to think happy path. You have to worry a lot about what are the suboptimal ways in which you could get compromised. And as they say, out of 100 paths, if one is exposed, your entire reputation gets tarnished. So you have to really get into more sophistication on the need for secure and reliable AI-based systems. In addition, I think there was a quote from Satya Nadella of Microsoft that while at times a security attack can compromise, what is truly unforgivable is not learning from that episode and preventing its recurrence. So again, your own processes and governance and methods to look at in the unforeseen event of something catastrophic happening, what is your bounce back mechanism, and how will you ensure that that unforeseen thing will always be foreseen going forward? I think equally important design consideration. Incremental to exponential we have talked about. I think it is a hockey stick effect really now. We are witnessing what we might call our miracles, like space shuttles being captured within hoists as it comes, which was inconceivable a decade or two ago. So, and that is in physical mechanics and space technology. So likewise in software and other businesses, what we consider to be impossible, I think seems routine or commonplace, attemptable these days. And obviously competitive advantage comes from those who can pull that off, and pull that off in the knowledge that what you pull off could get copied anyway in 3 months' time. So you will keep pulling it off recurringly. I learned from a retailer not long ago that the minute one retailer launches some new product or aisle or way of positioning a brand in some shelf somewhere, within 24 hours there will be some shoppers who come from somewhere else, obviously to figure out what. And within 2 weeks it will be replicated. We live in that kind of a hyper-competitive world where information flow is fairly barrierless. So competitive advantage has to morph into sustainable competitive advantage, which means the price or penalty for leading the pack has to be no option but to keep reinventing yourselves every so many quarters or weeks. So this exponential changes is capped with repetitive exponential changes. Digital systems were all the range. It's amazing how we thought MIS to ERP was great. We thought some form of cloud was great. We thought digital was all pervasive. And now here we are, thanks to this revolution, that digital in itself seems to be once upon a time. It's all now about AI star dot star, so to speak. And it is permeating because it's not text and linguistics alone. It is absolutely multimodal. So voice, translation, speech, visual recognition, and so on. I'm sure haptics, thanks to robotics, will come in. It is absolutely physical AI. That revolution is underway. So all of this in combining in some capacity is absolutely revolutionary. So I'm sure, as the saying goes, there are companies being born today who are native in these abilities and who might pass off for a VC funded firm or a startup or something, but can become the next big something or create a whole new class of a company itself. We don't know. So it's important to keep looking for that possibility. Human capital moves to human digital capital. This is probably a little cliched, but it's inevitable that algorithmic and AI teaming will form part. So I've often thought that when you do budgeting, I've been thinking last 6 to 12 months. When you do budgeting, typically we budget for how many people and that for electricity and commute and all that. And you have to budget for GPUs, for AI, for tokens. Is that the new denomination of how you conduct your business? If so, what are the business modeling techniques for that? What's the provision you need to give plus minus percent to make sure it's profitable? I think those sort of things. So looking at AI as capital to be provisioned for and looking for econometric models in terms of ROI on that is important. Like I said earlier, we take pride in being a superb programmer, if not anything else, right? So the plumbing, the wiring, the technology, cool stuff. But architecture, design, patterns, business problems to be solved, business solutions, technology fueling the business solution, as opposed to technology being the business solution. Not talking to business saying, I have you 3 new tools and 2 nice front ends, or you go figure. I have no clue. That's not going to work at all. So being design and architecture led, functionally, techno-functional, I think that's very important. And consuming technology is good, and we are all quite adept at it, but consuming it, formative years of my life in the industry were around being extremely frugal. You were constrained on memory, on CPU, on network, and therefore your mindset was not to think with a mindset of abundance. It was to think with constraints. So in hindsight, probably that way of thinking even constrained your imagination, which is sad, but it was a sign of the times. Today, I think it's an era of abundance. Most of our smartphones, leave alone laptops, if not anything, carry more computing power than what computing power took people to the moon 40, 50 years ago. So with that kind of abundance and relatively free abundance, what principles do you apply to harness that abundance to reimagine nice experiences and outcomes, but obviously not get carried away? Configure it and calibrate it so that it's a fit for purpose channelization of that. I think that's very important. It used to be said that back in the day, if you were on punch cards, you were allowed 1 shot or 2 shots at compilation. If not, you're thrown out because you simply don't get the grammar and the syntax of how to program right. Today, I think thanks to near infinite computational capacity, you can keep programming and testing to your heart's content till you get it right. So the number of cycles and iteration, and therefore the amount of power consumption has gone up. But maybe you're not too worried about it. But it's just a way of thinking. And it's a dichotomy. You're going to be abundant in imagining, but frugal in harnessing. So how do you balance that? Second chart on the impact on business is mindset. Mindset is a very nebulous word, easy to say, easy to preach, very difficult to practice. But I think there has to be an institutional structure to think and train your mind that, like they say, default is AI. Or as sometimes some institutions say, if you can prove to me you can do this without AI, then go ahead. Right? But it's very easy for me to say it here. It's really difficult to practice, but I think it has to be a way of doing this. Second, it is ubiquitous. It is general purpose technology, true to speak. and therefore it is inevitable, it has to be woven in. It is an electricity movement, undoubtedly. There lies some difficulty in that. Because it is general purpose, it becomes everybody's problem and nobody's individual problem. Whereas the people who run your workflows, who run your business processes, who run some tech stacks, cannot absolve themselves of not doing it because it's everybody's problem anyway. So I think that balancing act has to come in somewhere. It has to be woven in. It cannot be supplemental. It has to be threaded into the way of doing things, way of life. There is no tomorrow. If you wait till Jan 27 for it to get stable, frugal, economical, reliable, secure, there may be no need to do it anyway. So the time is now and the time was yesterday. Yeah, it's a big moment. And a lot of the business side of things have to do, like I said, with problem solving. So what are the problems that your customers have? How adept are you to relate to them? And how do you apply this technology and learn it? The learning part is important because I don't think we can all get sent to school tomorrow, packed away for 3 months, come back as an AI certified professional, and then resume our duties. There is no, by the time the syllabus will be outdated anyway. So how do you learn on the job and apply those principles of learning every day to the problems? I think that's the way. So this is all mindset again. And lastly, a very interesting debate that happened a couple of years ago as to whether you will not need user interfaces anymore. Just like Google famously has stuck to it for 25 years now, just one search bar, right? A very frugal, minimalist interface. Will all user-computer interactions happen frugally just through a prompt? We've not yet gotten there yet. But I think as multimodal ways of consuming AI evolve, you have to ask yourself that hard question. Is AI the interface to interact with the computer? And does it obviate the need for interfaces as they stand today? And if so, what does it mean to all the careful screens and designs and everything that you have done? So I famously remember when we started learning Power Builder back in the day, multi-tabbed data windows was all the rage. We went to great lengths to devise those things, or Oracle forms or whatever. And today, like, why bother? So you have to wonder about the impact of AI on the modalities of the human-computer interface, as opposed to AI merely as a substratum from a programming perspective. And that's again mindset. So a lot of the points here are about challenging status quo, moving from heritage to new age ways of doing things, which means a rather painful human aspect of it, which is coming out of a bubble or a comfort zone, undergoing a self-imposed transition, recognizing that there is an existential risk, recognizing that there's a coexistence period where both the machine and the human will be uncomfortable with each other, but you will settle down, and recognizing that this disruption is inevitable for some kind of a steady state few years down the road. So these are all related to the softer aspects of business, as it were, as contrasted with the earlier slide. And therefore, we arrive at a little bit of a glimpse of agentic AI, which is all the rage. You can't possibly go past a blog post or a tweet or a page of literature without looking at this. It has caught the attention where it has elevated beyond automation of business processes, robotic process automation, the words like automation and autonomy and so forth, and metamorphosized into a word called agency, where the nirvana or holy grail as it stands now is agentic AI technology having the means to not only reason as we humans do, but also take action, and that action being traceable to some kind of reasoning, and that action being backed up by the ability to undo the action in the event something goes, awry or astray, which is very interesting, which is what you would like ideally all machines to do, which is not only think, but also think and reason, but even beyond that, do and act. And not only do and act, but also roll back and fail safe in the event things go wrong. Things are underway. From a technology perspective, aspects of workflows being agentified, if I may, are starting to happen. And there are various examples. There could be sales processes. There could be, as you will see on some coming slides, the ability of agents to pronounce verdict on a set of regulations as to whether what you would traditionally do as change management, which is look at statutory stuff, somehow figure out in your brain that there is an impact, and then put pen to paper and enact something to take care of that impact. Agents are capable of doing. Furthermore, going beyond that to look at whether they can create some scripts to do a little beyond that. It's starting to happen. But in the holy grail form of it, where it will totally substitute the need for humans to take clever decisions, underway but not there yet. So the bullet points you see under the premise: autonomous decision making, goal-oriented action, and doing it proactively. Forget you triggering something or having a rule base with triggers and thresholds. It figuring out and doing it. Being even more, having the ability to relate to you as in setting the goals and then executing the task proactively. Thanks to the arrival of some protocols like the MCP. For retail, Google announced it at the NRF, the UCP, Unified Commerce Protocol. The ability to negotiate on your behalf with other humans, or if they have been clever enough to create their agents, with their agents, and therefore do brokerage on behalf of two humans. I think that's the premise really. And we are starting to see glimpses of that. I think it is important again from a mindset and reimagination perspective to ask some hard questions as to if our product or platform were to be completely agentified by some date, what it would look like. Will it obviate a need for some of these things? Is there an opportunity to ground up and reimagine it something very differently? I think having a gold standard for what an agentified avatar of your offering has today, and to work backwards from that goal and try and figure out, is an important, an inevitable, and a hard question to ask. And that's probably what many people are trying to do, be it for a singleton product or a slew of products and services as well, arguably. So where is it headed this year? I think enterprise scaling of it. Scaling is a word I think we will see or hear or discuss repeatedly, because from the initial phases of the euphoria to some kind of critical mass getting gathered now, how do you really take off is an inevitable question in the air. Reliability and safety and operational challenges, how do you build it around it? I think, I don't know if it's an appropriate word, I chose to use the word job archetypes. So what are the personas and the profiles in your own company and in your customers' organizations you deal with? This notion of workflows between them, are they relevant anymore? Are these job types and roles itself relevant given that this way of transacting will come? If an avatar can do the job, why have a human do it? You may move the person to something more, leverageable from that person, right? So how do you look at the nature? And I think this is where there's a extremely important intersection between academy, training and learning, HR, job types, role definitions, hierarchy, and agentic AI. They have to be looked at a composite, because each one feeds off the other. You can't look at it as an isolation. So I think some famous things goes, but there is a tool for that or something like that, some statement. So if you start asking the question, is there an AI for that? Then I think you yourself will come up with some inventive answers, if not innovative, to figure out what to do. So I think that reshaping workforce and job archetypes, which is often ignored, because it's like somebody will take care of it. Nobody will take care of it. It's coming at you, and you have to figure out how to take care of it. That's very important. Also on the sidebar, which I have not mentioned there, is this notion of AI completely flattening hierarchies. So the taxonomy of an organization, hierarchy, the general top-down drill down that we tend to see, right? A boss, then a layer, and then somebody doing the work. I think it's getting fairly secular that everybody becomes hands-on now. Because the common chassis, like we used to call, the enterprise bus, so to speak, the common bus is now an AI model. Everybody feeds off it. So everybody is on the bank of the river. So where is the hierarchy? And I think, I don't know the answer personally, but they say AI makes an average worker better. And therefore, the person who has a lot of knowledge may be average because it's all now inside a container, inside a model. Now, I don't know the truth to this. Maybe it is not so simplistic as it is made out. But all things considered, there is some kind of a leveling or a flattening happening. And that is a dynamic and organizational taxonomy and structures, role definitions, job type definition. And then you have security governance, of course. You have multi-agent systems. So a lot of this talk now is about swarms of agents, multi-agent orchestration. Look, I think most people are technologists or related to technology. I think this is an industry which I think is excellent in coining a lot of words. So it sounds nice, multi-agent orchestration. But to my simplistic programmatical mind, it is just a bunch of APIs, each calling the other with a result set. Pass, fail, yes, go. Data structure with some header, footer, and some records. So it's a variant of that. But it shows that there is a sophistication starting. Where there's an aggregation of these agents, and there are therefore methods to which you can configure them and calibrate them and look at what the end product must be. And therefore, the last bullet is inevitable. Green shoots of a specialization starting to emerge. So the commerce protocol is very important. What Google has put out, I have not played around with it, is the notion of creating these commerce protocols, agents, which on your behalf will procure, will make payments, etc., with vendors and other parts of a commercial ecosystem. So it's almost like somebody who's a human in some department giving agency to a bunch of agents to do their work on their behalf and come back. So that's where again I dwell on those two words. So if it does it well, great, your accountability is ensured. If it procures a lot of wrong stuff for absolutely the wrong price, then will you get fired the next morning? Or will you say that I didn't do it, it is my agent do it? And will that hold good with the Fed or with the RBI or with somebody, right, which we know the answer to? So this is where some tricky questions are starting to come in. But as with so many other forms of technology, I think it's like asking the question, what if my compiler inserts malicious code when creating the executable? I mean, at certain stages, certain maturities and certain standards emerge where you don't have to ask such questions. But yes, today probably it's topical. The numbers surprised me. I did some research. It says 50 billion by 2030. I think given that 600 to 800 billion is invested in data structure, AI infrastructure capacity, it seems to be a small number actually. I would think it's bigger. But again, we don't go by these numbers, I'm sure. It's just the trend that there is a large market out there. But suffice to say, I think if I can speak liberally, and correct me if I'm wrong, given the business that you are in and the fact that there is a certain way of administering workflows and business objects that you have cultivated over the years, it is inevitable that to take advantage of that number, you'll have to look at what is an agentic avatar of what you do today. And how do you in turn do it agentically as well? Kind of recursive, but I think it has to be looked at. So that's on agentic AI. So some examples. Again, some is my knowledge, some is I searched, and some is like I told sir, I used AI also to find out. It was very interesting. And found out that different segments of what you might call are the banking workflow or the banking value chain or finance, so to speak. There are already gold standard institutions out there doing stuff. So back office, process chains. See, I think there are a lot of startup legal companies already there doing what is cited here. JPMC, all of this is public information, which is I think the standard way of looking at it is all of the human collateral, the artifacts and contracts are a great example of it, have a taxonomy. And you can train these models to understand what the taxonomy is. And once they're trained to understand what the ideal taxonomy is, you can train it to therefore recognize what are the outliers, which is what exactly this is all about. So there are a lot of legal companies funded by VCs that already offer legal solutions where hiring an intern or a junior lawyer or whatever can be done to some degree using AI. Great example, I thought. Risk and compliance, bunch of statutes keep coming out routinely. Some may be daily, some certainly weekly, monthly, etc. So how do you sniff for what are the ingredients of these statutes or legalistic things that are mooted, and figure out a way to assess the relevance of it or significance of it to your institution or the assets that you have created, and give you an impact analysis. Now, Nirvana is then agents take over. Also look at the fact that these 15 APIs, those 20 programs, and those 11 schemas are impacted. And then even more better for Nirvana, they go do the change, run your regression pack, and then certify pass fail. We'll see how we get there. But for starters, assessing the impact of that, I think there are companies doing it. Chatbots, virtual assistants, I think all of us use these days. And that's what is in the customer experience story. What I found interesting from a customer experience and AI advisory in the relationship management scheme, which I also saw in few other industries like pharma and retail, is the time of a human is best used in serving the customer based on an assessment of all the data points about the customer. So at the moment of interaction, me to you, you're across the kiosk or a window, or say you've come to a branch. We then trying to gather all the data about you, and then in 16 seconds or more, trying to figure out therefore what it means, and then disengaging my intellectual time and then engaging with you emotionally is a draw on my cognition. It's a drain. So using agentic, if all of that comes in front of me the moment you appear in front of me, so I have it, and then I interact with you that much more emotionally, if not intelligently using it, is a better use of my time and a better consumption of your time for me to serve you better. And therefore, I think that kind of an AI advisory that is talked about there, where the focus is on the relationship, which is the USP, and not the data gathering, I think is a great usage of this here.
Sorry to interrupt. Today, any mobile app of the banking application, there is an avatar. Basically, it gives you what is my balance or what I lost. It gives actually. But it never tells me that hey, you have kept so much money in your fee, it is earning a low interest.
Yeah.
Would you like to convert it into
yes.
high yielding?
Correct.
That is, this is where the advisory comes.
Yes.
This advisory, earlier bankers used to give this.
Yes.
Now, as a banker working in a branch,
yeah.
my manager used to go look at the account wherever there is a balance, whether to move it into fixed deposit, you will get the better interest. There was a personal touch. Yeah. Now there is a digital which only gives me the balance in the account, but not giving me advisory as to how better I can utilize my funds. This is all done by brokers and all who would like to transfer the money to either share market or something like that. But this is really an area where
yes.
we can. Similarly, the first one we said about that legal document, it has come in one of our demo where we told that as a proof of evidence, the signed agreement will be attached. Okay. Now the other person asked whether it will read the agreement and confirm that it is as per our standard format.
Right.
So it comes to
whether
your AI will read it, but he says even no, you have to read the content of the agreement.
Yeah.
So unless I have a standard agreement,
yes.
So I won't be able to do
correct.
It.
Correct.
I answered like that.
Yeah.
But these requirements are slowly.
The requirements are there and it is capable because if you create
I'm experiencing a lot of things what you are saying.
Correct.
Yes.
So the potential is limitless because it depends on our brain works on based on what is an ideal situation and therefore what are the variances. This being silicon, it doesn't know what is ideal unless you train it to say this is ideal to what sir said, and then compare and contrast.
So from this relationship management, you are moving from reactive to proactive basis.
Yes.
That's what.
Yeah. So relationship by definition has emotional equity. For whatever reason, I think it has degenerated over a lot of time to transactional means of working, which to his point is about a chatbot or a virtual assistant merely focused on question answer, but not therefore inquiring with your welfare in mind on what will be good for you and then coming back.
Unless it is a wealth management chatbot which looks at all your transactions in the bank and you're able to tell what you can do kind of a thing. So these are all things which we said about advisory. What is the advisory of various things? For example, medical advisory can be something else, and banking something else. In manufacturing, it could be something else actually. In procurement, so many things related to AI advisory is possible in terms of procuring a product, typical ERP or manufacturing setup. But the advisory role needs additional intelligence to the prompt engineering program or
Right.
Agentic AI, whatever that we are designing. That has to be input. That's why I was talking to you. We have to input that. More and more input, it becomes a very powerful Agentic AI for that particular purpose for which we have deployed.
Right. Which is where, again, linking it to one of the first two slides, the notion of a small model, a vertical domain model, which you train, and by definition, you want to keep it as your brand asset, secure your IP and all that. I think that becomes very important because those kind of insights where you elevate the stature of your customer, it's a symbiotic relationship. So you get paid for it and all that. That comes way only if you operate that way.
That's why they are going from LLM to SLM.
Yes, that is the
Creating a different avatars.
Yeah.
In terms of the risk profiling, what the banks are currently doing.
Yes.
In terms of what is the risk profiling,
That is the
investments.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's how they are.
That's the trend that is underway.
No,
But-
even in loans, you said a very important point. In small loans, particularly, earlier the manager used to see the person, and maybe on data he may be qualified, but somehow he may have felt that there is a feeling, that experience that he may not repay the loan, so he will decline the loan. So there was a manually. Today, what happens? These are all automated processes.
Yes.
So they go by his income.
Yes.
They say what is the disposable income, blah blah blah. So he is qualified. Then he referred to underwriting like that.
Yes.
But nowhere a psychometric analysis or something is done to that person and see his propensity to repay the loan.
That is true.
That is not embedded into the program that we are talking about.
Yeah.
So again, I'm coming to the point that there is a lot of scope in improving these areas to know that whether the person is has the willingness to repay the loan. That is more important than whatever processing you are doing in respect of.
That is true. Yes. In fact, that's a good segue into the next point, which is credit underwriting. So I came across this interesting company called Upstart, which looks at not only the traditional data types, data sets, but also a lot of other social kind of factors which could influence the quality of a better underwriting decision. So when I used to work in reinsurance, I was taught you have facultative and treaty reinsurance. Treaty is very algorithmic, rule-based and limits and all that. Facultative is where the tacit knowledge of the person reviewing the need for reinsurance comes in. And I think it remains a mystery for now how our own intelligence works, on what factors we sanction or not sanction something, etc. But I think AI is slowly encroaching into that territory. Whether it will be 100% of it, I don't know. Can it be trained to be some good percentage of it? The answer is yes. As the density of the model, the size of the model improves, definitely. And this credit underwriting is a great example of that, where they are pulling in other social data. Even, to look at social feeds and then sniff customer sentiment has been a standard technique for more than a decade now, where you go beyond the corporate enterprise data and look at an individual's tweet or whatever, aggregate it, sniff social sentiment, and then figure out how a brand is doing. So this is absolutely going in that direction.
Social media.
Acha.
Actually, demos, but
okay.
not really probably taken off. More relating to, I think, marketing agencies who can really look for how you evaluate a brand, compare with the product. Even a finance product with the bank A and bank B.
Yes.
How does this get reflected in the social media by customers? Gather that information and give that analysis.
Correct.
So even if you want to bring out a new product
Yeah.
bank side to analyze and see what customers are facing
Yeah.
as problems in their
Absolutely.
normal thing where they are approaching the banks for
Yeah.
loans and you're not able to satisfy them.
Absolutely.
Cover all of that through the product that you're planning to come
Yes.
up with. That's something which we have.
No, that's a great point, because often authenticity comes from the anonymity.
Yeah.
So the more you get from your non-traditional sources rather than the standard flyer, CSAT survey and all that, the more, if you really want to act on it, the more genuine it is likely. So, yeah. So again, for treasury and KYC onboarding, came across a couple of examples. These agentic actually, like what I saw was GS having agents actively monitoring news feeds, which play a role into the kind of treasury functioning that they got to do. KYC I thought was important, though I think most banks, even in India today, do a very good job of it, very fast. Yes. So, but the notion of whether you need a human at the other side of the video camera or an avatar will KYC certify you, which is a little bit of a gray territory. I think some experiments are going on there. So the bottom line is value chain. If you think about all the aspects of how a bank or a financial institution works, literally at every node of the value chain, there is an infusion of AI, and at an aggregate basis also there is a AI possibility. And this is just a subset of so much going on. So brings us to a sectoral overview. So I thought I'll segment this in three parts. One is the drivers across the sectors. Then I'll very quickly go through the different industries to just give a proof point, and then some learnings, I guess, after which we'll go to the capability talent section. So the drivers across sectors, we talked about the fear of missing out, etc., is basically the kind of money being poured in is unthinkable. If you think crores and millions are big amounts, I mean, this is hundreds of billions going in. So the amount of capex that is going in is quite mind-boggling, and very short span of time. 2 years, 3 years, I mean 12 quarters, give or take. The ubiquity, it is all over the place. Maybe thanks to the cloud, since everybody uses cloud services, you have access to models, and therefore the reach, and it's moving very fast. So the first point I made here is consumer space. We talked about it. ChatGPT was released to the wild. So everybody now has access to that, or Claude, or in India, I think it's riding on the telcos. Airtel has a free Perplexity, offering, or students have free licenses. I mean, so it's just kind of democratized, right? And definitely the fact that it's going beyond your carefully defined entity relationship model and table and view and traditional data set structures means now suddenly you have access to documents, images, and audio and linguistics that honestly were not part of computational taxonomy till just very recently. It was a holy grail. Ironically, the need for literacy and knowledge was because you had to be that in order to deal with these machines. Now, why do you need to bother? I think all of us have been pained to go through shorthand and typewriting and all as a way to type faster. Why bother? You can just speak into it now. So there are a lot of these traditional frictional elements that have just evaporated because it deals with different forms of I/O and different forms of data retrieval and persistence these days. And it's just the beginning. And as much as the cloud has grown, the oft neglected client component of it, the edge, is equally growing. There is so much of computational and AI density at the edge now that a lot of the problems we used to have with the latency and all those issues you had in aggregating, bunching, sending, if you design it well, of course, are gone because you have it equally at the edge. So rather than think client server, you can calibrate what needs to be done at the edge and what on the cloud rather dynamically these days. And we see that factory assembly line process automation is a great example of it. A lot of stuff can be done on the assembly line compute itself rather than dispatch to the cloud, wait and come back. So that kind of thing. Parallel computing, thanks to the GPUs, is all here to stay. I think the danger is not of not having access to it, but of not ending up paying too much to use it all the time. So, and chipsets are only getting better. I have not used one word throughout this deck, which is the word technical obsolescence. I think the one thing that we have to be wary about is, as cool and as exciting all this technology is, the rate of obsolescence or the rate of refresh is significantly high. So again, that bakes into your bill of material and the depreciation and the cost of keeping it current and relevant point. I think all of us have jobs where we are paranoid about end of life, where some product vendor or software vendor says, come this date, I will no longer be supporting this product. Then you have to worry about migration, for which the end customer will say, it's your problem, boss. Why should I pay for your migration? Be it data or software. And the obsolescence is not necessarily factored in. And anyway, you're not providing a brand new feature set. You will still do account balance inquiry on your new thing, but using version X.Y now instead of version X.X. So why should I pay you for it? But to you, from a balance sheet hit perspective, it's a real pain. So I think that has to be kept in mind and not get carried away with that. The ability to create smaller models we saw. Engineering, programming, testing, conversion, re-engineering, migration, modernization, data migration. I think these are all set to be completely reimagined using AI. So if you look at it simplistic but apex level, the way you train a model is very intimate with how you assess a taxonomy. So if you take, for example, a code taxonomy, a programming language, code base, or a data taxonomy, which is a schema, and you use the model to analyze it, it can tell you clearly which are the entities, which are the records, which are the attributes, what are the rules that go with the attribute, what are the rules that go with regard to the relationship between the entities, and so on and so forth. And it's my phone, I'll just... No, it's somebody else who has a similar call. Yeah. So, same with programming, especially non-event driven languages. It has a very clever way of analyzing what is called, what is not called, cyclical. If you go to mainframes, how the programs are architected, how the JCLs run, etc. So you have the ability to harness the source taxonomy. You have the ability to specify the target taxonomy. And you have the ability to use AI to create the conversion routines to move from source to target. So I think for an institution like yours, where probably end of life, warranties, expiry, both on the data and software side, we were discussing that is of importance, particularly where customers will not want to foot the bill for you or call you to do it frugally. This is an avenue that has to be explored very aggressively. It can be as trivial as using a ChatGPT prompt to start. The flip side is open models, open world, knowledge transferred is knowledge gone. So how do you figure out to create a DMZ'd version of all this for yourself, where you're absolutely sure that it is contained and inadvertently something that is extremely proprietary to you or to your clientele does not go out. That is something that you will have to ensure.
One thing that we have happened now in a limited way, small models is a parallel program. Those days, we used to, for example, simple thing like interest application. We were able to solve the problem of too much time it was taking. 2 days it was taking to complete the interest application. By running the same program parallelly in multiple, firing the same job from multiple terminals.
Yeah.
E200 or whatever.
Yes.
That
green screen.
Then later came multi-threading and all those things came. Now in the case of AI, where I'm depending on prompt engineering programming, loosely I call it as an agentic AI for my product purpose. Now that is the only guy. Now there could be multiple people calling his service now. Now he does not have the ability to spawn himself and service the request now. Now he is depending on the GPU.
Yeah.
Now I can't scale the GPU when I am trying to implement it in a typical bank or branch situation. Now, no, I can't go and tell the customer, no, you have only 30 GPU, you please increase it to 64, or the cost is going to be prohibitive, right?
Yeah.
Or I have to say, no, this, the other alternative, these are all dilemmas, real-time dilemmas, actually. The other alternative is, no, you please remove the AI part of that, actually, and let us write a program Python program to handle that. Even though AI can do, prompt engineering can do, AI programmer can do it quickly. A Python programmer has to do it. Maybe it may take 3 days to write a program, but still my problem will be solved. So when AI will be able to address this problem of handling the multiple users' requests for the same job kind of a thing. No, that is going to be a key issue
It is.
In the adoption of AI and the cost.
It's a very valid point. And first is a confession. I am not an expert in parallel computing, but having interacted with the likes of NVIDIA, there is definitely a sophistication to how you consume the technology. For example, there is a bunch of software libraries they have for different verticals. Secondly, at the more base layer, they have something called CUDA, which is their way of accessing their chipsets. Now, the challenge lies in not looking at AI monolithically as one block, but at getting under the hood, looking at the process, the need for parallel compute, and then deciding which processes need to be architected as multi-threaded processes and which ones use these libraries and sets to consume the chipsets where required. And in certain cases, I've heard that you have to be clear about whether the compute needs to go closer to the data or the data needs to come close to the compute to avoid a network latency issue. And last but not the least, do you need this as a matter of normal BAU business processing, or is this at some seasonal intervention or for some certain types of jobs or processes, etc.? So a lot of this goes to the systems thinking approach, which is where are these big problems to be solved, issues arising, and then how do I design, architect, and then engineer for this? So your point is fantastic, absolutely valid, but to be looked in the context of how do you get under the hood of AI and look at the technology stack, including the chipset architecture, and then going about architecting it.
So if I'm permitted to add from my experience, we did precisely the same thing when we delivered quantum computing to a bank. In terms of figuring out what routine to run when and what is the memory consumption of each of those routines and how to make the best utilization of the underlying chip power what they have and how do we put the business priorities in terms of running the particular routines without getting hungry for more memory and power. So that's what I did. In fact, that's what the example I shared with you. Previously, the balance sheet of the country, it used to reach the finance ministry in 7 working days. That's what the thing is.
Right.
But after we implemented the quantum banking solution at Japan, they were able to get within 36 hours.
Fantastic.
First time the balance sheet of the country was tabled in the parliament in 36 hours. So, but beyond this, there was a lot of research and both the intellect team and the HP engineering team worked together. And in fact, we did 9 iterations in terms of bringing up the. In fact, we started with Superdome 1 and then we moved on to Superdome 2.
I see.
In terms of this, and so we were all very much conscious in terms of the chip power and the memory and what it means to consume. And in fact, we segregated the entire routine accordingly because we are designing something for the country and not for a bank.
Yeah.
So that's that's how we do that.
Yeah.
It's a great example. I totally agree. That is the whole top-down approach that you have to take in order to do this. Great. A few thoughts regarding the sectors, creativity versus conformance. This Gen AI especially allows you to do a lot of things. So be my guest, explore. At the same time, the way we run society and markets are conformist way. So the balance. Probabilistic deterministic is probably the single biggest thing because by definition, the underlying transformer architecture does not allow for your standard computational ways of working. There's no point in blaming it. It is the way it is. But it does some fantastic things as well. So how do you use it for the strengths, the reliable strengths, and trade-off versus the classical computing way is important. Agency we discussed, give it the license to do stuff, but how do you rein it in safeguards? And there are probably many more things here. I think these are all design considerations.
One point, sir, what you rightly said. How much data is too much data for a bank to share with me?
Right.
That they are not able to draw a line because they are really worried.
Yeah.
Like, because they are going to use ChatGPT or they want to use Cloud or Gemini or Copilot.
Yeah.
So they don't know what we can share and what we cannot share.
Yes.
Because once you, as you rightly said, once you share some information, it is out.
Yes.
And they don't have a control who does what over.
Yeah.
So that's where the people are actually looking at some safeguards.
Yes, and that safeguard at a apex level comes from sovereignty, the cloud, and then obviously the privacy of the model, which is inside your four walls. And then obviously it comes against the trade-off of the next time the LLM evolves to 8.5 version, then what are you going to do now? So those are all not to be worried about points, but points to be kept in mind. I think it's a question of choices and consequences. You make some intelligent choices, you live with those consequences for 1 or 2 years, then there's some more capex or opex you need. And this plays into the volatility thing. The ground under our feet is not stable. It is a moving target. We have to recognize that unlike the, if you go back, this is very interesting, I'll take a minute. 30s to probably 60s or 70s, it was valve and diode and all that. It was as stable as it gets, except for the fact that valves themselves were not stable. Every time they'll fuse, you have to put a new one, etc. Then semiconductor technology, no matter you move from 8080 to whatever advanced version you have now of chipsets, the underlying interface was the same. So you are abstracted away from the underlying complexity. Today, I think you're pitched into the open furnace now. The models are changing, the programming language. I didn't know in 2015 or 2018 that Python would become so popular. And this year it is Python. I don't know next year what is out there. I didn't know that a Postgres or a MongoDB would be so popular. So schooled on DB2 and SQL Server and Sybase and DB2, I didn't think of it, right, or Oracle. So, and I'm sure the DB2 till it came along in '88, everyone thought IMS and IDMS was here to stay, since they were developed before that. Or guys before that thought VSAM and other file sets were here to stay. So I think the technology curve we are undergoing is now too many S curves in too frequent a duration. The frequency of refresh and therefore the rate of obsolescence, the contrarian view of that, is very high. So the notion of is OPEX the new CAPEX has to be asked, which is a difficult thing to say, but it's the reality of the market we are living in. For simple reasons that the iPhones are recycled every 12 months. And you now lease phones rather than buy them. So when hardware has become a leasing model, where do you think software has a chance to survive? Leave alone.
Once upon a time, IBM came out with the punchline, AS400 never fails.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
So any bank you go, they say, oh, it's AS400.
Yeah.
Then my job
I remember the same for tandem non-stop kernel.
Exactly.
Yeah.
S390 is on one end,
Yeah.
AS400,
Yeah.
then they tied up with DB2.
Right.
I was working in a technology company in which they say that if you want to play safe, go and pitch AS400 with DB2. So our software order is safe.
Yeah.
So, but things are evolving.
So AS400 with VSAT aperture terminals connected to the mainframe was state of the art.
Yes.
But times have changed now. So I think this is shaking up everything. That's why I say every sector reconfigured. The societal norms of working in the marketplaces and the ways we work are set to be reimagined. So we'll see. But it's important to play ball and keep these points. So that is one reason for the drivers. The other is the drivers are the operating model is changing. Workforce, I talked about it. Customer interface, not just the computational presentation layer, but how you interact with customers. Supply chain, because the way you look at your IT bill of material now, if you're running at a data center, you have to worry about chips. You have to worry about advances in parallel compute. You have to think about what quantum is all about truly, and whether quantum encryption will be here to stay, which invalidates a lot of your security protocols ranging from RSA to whatever, painstakingly built over 20 years. So those are real. Stakeholder and governance, we've talked about it. The interesting phenomenon is disaggregation and aggregation. Just like things like Uber or Airbnb taught us that if you disaggregate the value chain, you can unlock value at every node thanks to technology. The same is happening with AI now. You can disaggregate a lot of the workflows and the modalities of interaction, and you can eke out value. An example is software engineering, this DLC, because programming is now to some extent starting to get democratized. Your workforce of having a hardcore computer science programming in copious volumes is not needed. You could probably disaggregate that and look at different types of personnel doing different things. At the same time, aggregation is equally important because you've disaggregated and now created so many nodes. Using AI, you can aggregate it again and figure out what value to unlock. So this is fascinating, and you have to look at the applicability of this to each thing, which is why I think this is a little more potent than any other form of ubiquitous technology that has come our way. So there's a need to rethink a lot of things. A lot of time has to go into that. Across sectors, banking and to some extent insurance we discussed earlier, claims I talked about. But if you look at education, the avatars tutoring you in a hyper personalized way. So each student could be a segment of one, and each university could be a segment of one to you, which means a Gurukulam style one-on-one personalized approach is quite possible. So we'll have to see what that means. Media and entertainment, obviously Netflix is the single greatest example of how you get into an echo chamber of your own where you're shown what you want to see. Telecom, network provisioning, network or optimization, companies like AT&T adopting it using AI ops. The holy grail is always going to be forecasting the demand, being lean on inventory, just-in-time supply. And I think India is a great example because of Blinkit and everybody else, right? But definitely AI is playing a role. This whole loop of forecasting, replenishment, and dispatching at an optimal price.
So the point number one, sir, if you have unlimited
Yes.
of this personalization. Yesterday I was talking to one of my ex-colleagues with he's now with Lloyd's Bank in UK. So now it has gone to an extent in which the customer will not enter the branch. The moment the customer comes outside the branch, or if he's going to park his car, etc., or he's coming nearby, they take a fee and they recognize the face recognition.
Oh, okay.
They see who is coming, and automatically it gets transmitted to, everything is automated, his favorite personal banker.
Oh.
And if the favorite personal banker is not there for some reason, or he or she is tied up, it automatically goes to the second. Personal banker. And every step the customer walks into the branch, he gets tracked. And they have gone to the hyper personalization, which if it comes on Monday, this could be the reason.
Oh.
If he's coming on Tuesday, this is the reason. And if he's coming alone, it could be for a personal. If he's coming with his office colleagues, it could be for a business thing. So they took that extent and accordingly they sound alert with the branch head, they sound alert with the personal banker.
Clinical trials and I think drug discovery is a great use case, hitting the headlines repeatedly. There are specialist companies being formed in that regard. Energy, how the customer or the consumer can become a prosumer, trade energy units on a grid, and how do you allow for the pricing of that, supply demand balancing. Travel disruption, there's a great example of United Airlines using a solution which is, in the event your flight is disrupted in an airport, then automatic rerouting of you to save you the hassle at the queue or the emotional stress of having to deal with rebooking and all that, which always is an issue. So again, using AI to help there. Digital twins, we have all heard enough about. I think it's absolutely a reality these days, where the simulation way of a physical universe and looking at toggling with various parameters and figuring out the cost of the real world thing being minimal is there. Utilities, I think, great example of forecasting wildfires or forest fires by gathering data from past incidents, from satellite data, which attests to the certain texture or color or whatever in a certain latitude, longitude, and then proactively telling the utility that watch out, there is likely to be something occurring here, and therefore take preemptive measures. I think those are again good examples. Supply chain, I think shipment routing and route optimization. CPG as similar to retail, and healthcare, of course, AI aided diagnostics. Radiology is all the rage right now because X-rays seem to be lending themselves naturally for machine vision, computer vision, and more to come. So,
some two sectors. Like one is about astrophysics that uses hobby.
Right.
And they have gone up to 3 billion years.
Okay.
With
AI.
technology.
Wow.
And, they wanted to take up to 4.2 billion years, which is the evolution of our solar system.
Okay.
So that extent they wanted to do.
Right.
The other is they are like this rapid advancement in genetics.
Genetics. Okay. Sure. So I think the statistic I read allied to genetics is the cost of or the elapsed time to figure out the permutations of drug discovery research cycle is rapidly shrinking. And this goes even beyond the mRNA kind of thing that happened during COVID. So we'll have to see what impact this has on future notions of what is a clinical trial, what is drug discovery, is there hyper-personalized medicine that can be given your genetic constitution and your current health situation, what should be the calibration to a dosage or the constitution of the ingredients that need to come to you.
When we talk about drug design and delivery,
right.
the same antibiotic, whether it has to be taken in the pill form or it has to
right.
be taken intravenous or it is an intramuscular.
Okay.
Now they are going to that extent which could be the most effective way in which a medicine can be taken for a human being.
Right. So the segment of one is becoming more and more real, I guess. Yeah. So in this chart, the concluding slide or two is, why AI and agentic AI. I think by now it should be clear there is an industrialization of intelligence going on. So brands don't need to view the consumer as a segment anymore, but as one person, which means a potential for scaling this and repeating it, exponential ROI. The moat or the distinction a brand acquires therefore comes from how they take something and hyper-personalize it to a consumer. And that will probably be the unique selling proposition as opposed to the generic product that they carry or the process that they administer. Regulated sectors, you have to be careful because AI can advise, but the human has to decide. So that calibration. Consumers, personalization, which is all of what has been discussed last several minutes. Operations, a mixture of efficiency and reimagination, depending on the type of operation. Agentic AI is an emerging story, new still, we'll see where it goes. The work and the hierarchies and the human capital has to be very carefully considered, but all said and done, it has to be stitched into, it cannot be a bolt-on. I think that's the kind of summary on the AI agent.
One of the most known banks in India is collaborating with Amazon.
Okay.
To increase their market share in consumer lending. Now, whatever we do in Amazon is no longer a secret.
Right.
Whatever we buy in Amazon, now banks are approaching.
Right. Which is islands of disparate data ecosystems getting conjoined.
I think that Amazon, how do we do a consumer finance?
Even otherwise, right? They are offering you
safety
card.
Payment.
So the schemes already already
that is from Amazon.
So automatically
but now
that's tied up with the banks.
Tied up with the bank. Now banks are approaching Amazon to extract the data so that they can.
I guess one is a push, one is a pull.
Yes.
So
if you use the card, the information goes to the bank automatically. They know that you have bought from us.
Not only from cards. You do a UPI in which your bank account is a debit point, or you take in terms of your direct NEFT. Any touch point what they create, now the bank wants
payments are digital now. Everything is captured. My only question is whether what product I bought, whether that information also goes to the bank. I'm not sure. That is not clear.
And actually, what are the points?
Apparently, the category is
but
they will say if you buy Agentic is offering it automatically.
Where was it?
This is Kochi.
Achha.
Actually, this is Kochi
Okay.
for R&D department.
R&D.
Actually, sir, what you said for the face scan recognition
Was
and
done
body alignment, and we have trigger with the big data analytics.
Okay.
Like that time we using Adobe distributed file system, high detail loadings,
Got it.
pieces, and mobile application tracking everything.
Sure.
Integrated with, they have reached that actually this point with the next product of in European region. They are
Okay.
implementing slowly. They started from 17, 19 model actually. As he said, from Lloyd's they are implementing as well. They already started in 2019 itself. That tap on card payment, near field communication we call it exactly. NFC. Now we are coming to that point only. Now only we are reaching to 2025. They are all such advanced from 7 years from our industry.
So on the talent part, I think the mindset word we've discussed many times. So while all the action and the glamour, if I may, seems to be how do you use the models, how do you use them for programming, etc. I think certain good old-fashioned basics don't go away. So firstly, fundamentally understanding what is the business problem to be solved or the business opportunity to be exploited. Therefore, how do you delineate it as per a certain problem statement or specs, for want of a better word. And then the design and the architecture using a human AI ecosystem has to be thought through. I think that primary thing doesn't go away. And a certain awareness of AI fundamentals. Right? At the end of the day, it's important to go back and look at some good old vector math, matrix multiplication, algebra, probability, statistics. Maybe not too deep, but at least reinforce. Yeah, because that's the underlying technology of this. The business domain knowledge will remain an evergreen staple. It is important not to lose the forest for the trees. So that's the most important thing.
As you rightly said, techno-functionalism is.
Yeah.
In your earlier slide, you have been talking about cross-skilling. All technology people should be cross-skilled on domain, and all domain people must have a cross-skilling on technology.
Yes.
So the line of distinction is going to disappear.
More and more.
More and more.
Yes, that's true.
Actually, one point you mentioned is data. Then you talked about knowledge, then wisdom, then pervasive.
Yes.
4 points. Domain knowledge, so long as you use AI at the data level and it is not visible to the banker, okay, I don't think there is any problem in adopting that quickly in any product that we do. For example, migration from one version to another version, which is purely data migration or application migration,
right,
or whatever it is. But moment you come to knowledge, where I need, I am using AI, but I need a validation from the banker. I try to show him now, is it okay? He asked 2 questions. If AI can do, why AI cannot decide whether it is correct or not? Why there is a intervention? Why this intervention is required? These situations we experience. Of course, I say no, banker. I know banker mindset. Banker is expected to communicate because AI may sometimes go wrong. Like that, we used to tell that actually, then we used to convince. But what I'm saying is that at the knowledge level, buying the banker for adoption is going to be changing, but it is not as free as at the data level.
Yeah.
Of course, at wisdom level, I don't know.
So that is very true.
It's going to take, but we are trying to crack the knowledge level how to.
It's a very.
How to trade off between what to show for its confirmation, what to not to show for confirmation. The trade off is where we are currently. It's actually
very deep point because it borders on can computers eventually replace a human, which doesn't seem to be the case as of now. It also is the subject of several podcasts, if not anything, as to how do you correlate what neuroscience teaches us about our abilities to reason, think, learn. Very interestingly, on one podcast with, I think the person Ilya Sutskever, who's part of OpenAI earlier, what is the human motivation to learn? So why do you want to learn to drive a car? You have a motivation, a desire, and then you figure out how to learn and eventually learn. Why would a machine want to learn to drive a car? Of course, you can train it. It has models. You can argue the LiDAR way is better or the camera way is better. Waymo or the other thing. And those debates are there. But what is a primal instigation for it to do something? So I think what Sir is touching upon is an extremely deep question, which a lot of cognitive scientists and technologists are wrestling with. And I don't know the answer at all.
No, I know. Trying to crack it, So generally, we manage it with parameterization. Because we come from the heritage.
Yes.
Actually, we get parameterization.
So parameterization, trilogy, neuron rules network, or rule-based expert system, we are conversant with.
I used to tell my team also, parameterization, age old, 40 years old. Right. You cannot live without that. Yeah. Because we are confronting a situation where we don't know whether you will accept or not. Yeah. So we have to parameterize. I used to. So
there is the premise that large language models, which are currently state of the art, encapsulate the universe of human knowledge. Now, there is a greater debate going on whether language in itself is an adequate tool to capture all of human knowledge or human learning anyway, because it is just one subset of how we sense, perceive. And besides language, there is numbers also, right? Enumeration of stuff. So these are a lot of gray areas. I'm sure there's research going on this. For now, the premise is based on whatever the initial corpus of information that is available that leads to these knowledge models, with some supplementing, that is additional training, ragging the model, verticalizing it, using smaller, denser versions. Maybe you can get to certain levels of thinking, reasoning, and actioning that otherwise would call for a human to do. Now, that's a very qualitative statement. So, is that 9 on 10 or 6 on 10? I don't know. And probably it depends on context and use case and workflow as well. But the lingo is changing. 90s, 30, 40 years, it's been SDLC programming. Now we're talking prompting. Engineering and the ability of the functional to be complemented with the non-functional aspects of engineering to be reliable is very important. I think good old validation and verification is going to be extremely relevant, because that bridges the action to accountability gap. And running the business, we'll have to see where it is headed, because cost of running the business, obsolescence, refreshing, what are the economics of that is going to come up for debate. Secondly, just like I would think sadly in society, we don't repair things anymore. We throw and get a new thing. Likewise, the notion of software maintenance, currency, technical debt, do these words mean anything anymore? Your API doesn't work. I'll prompt a new agent in 2 minutes for that. Why should I worry about the elegance of the code base, the traceability? I'm saying this to prompt a debate. I don't think that's the right way of saying it, but I think it's important to have that debate. And
generally, I suspected no. I don't want to sell software. My product, I don't want to sell as a product. I want to sell it as a box. Okay.
So the outcomes are
like your MG battery replacement. I will say replace it in 5 years. Okay. You already sold OPEX is CAPEX now. So you pay every year for what you use, you pay. Okay. Now, from his point of view, there is no risk. I'm now bundling software and the solution, hardware and the solution, and give it in a box. Now, of course, I have a challenge in AI coming into the AI server cannot run my application.
Right.
Those issues I have to resolve it. But if I can track that, then I am now got the mindset of the consumer that I'm not giving a solution to you, I'm giving a box with a solution. So, the scalability and the marketability, everything will be totally different. For him, it is that, every month you pay whatever you are paying, the EMI concept kind of thing. So, it will be a different, that's why when you said we have to reimagining, rethinking.
Yes.
So, these things,
that's a fair point. Yeah. If I was a consumer though, and answering my board, my reply to you, just for a debate, would be, then I'm totally dependent on you.
But you have a replacement,
No, but I have to come to you only for the replacement.
Oh, yeah.
So as a consumer, my choice, the trade-off is there,
No,
obviously.
I agree with you. The replacement is I'm giving you assurance to replace. But doesn't mean that you have to replace with me. You can replace with any solution.
Yeah.
And
So,
the choice is with you.
yeah. So the dynamic between the buyer and the service provider, I think those are all going to get shaken up. We have to see how it goes.
Battery concept is really shaking. Now I get a car with 4.5 lakh with a battery on a usable basis.
Right.
It's changing the.
No, even a smartphone, like the old Nokia, the battery went, you would just put. Now every time the battery goes in your phone, you are like, oh, I have to change my phone. So you are held hostage. But look, people are okay with it because they get a new fancy phone, extra pixels on the camera, whatever. So agent economy and then this heritage and AI age, we have to see. Couple of quick slides. Mindset, framing the problem. I keep coming across this word framing repeatedly last few months. I don't know why, but I think framing the problem is definitely an important thing. And then how do you solve that problem? By collaborating with AI. And be very grounded that the outcome is important, not the tech stack or the parallel or the sequential or the code base. And system design has to take into account a lot of these keywords, fail-safe, trade-offs, probabilistic, deterministic. How do you work with LLMs as part of your tech stack? Historically, I used to, at least I grew up on that. I'm so hard-coded on presentation layer, data layer, business layer. I just can't think LLM layer and chip layer. But today you have to deal with it. There is no choice. And workflow designs, what are the patterns? Where can you use MCP if your UCP came on January first week? Maybe some CP for every vertical will come by end of the year. So what are they? How are you going to use? People talk of these CPs as USB-Cs for software. So how do you get into the ODBC kind of a concept? With the trade-offs. If you use ODBC, your performance will suffer. If you don't use ODBC, your interoperability will suffer. So what's the choice? Again, you have to think through. And then the capability, the other thing is as a university or an academy or a learning curriculum, how do you get the staff to get very acquainted with vector database technology, APIs, fast API in particular, LangChain. I think legacy or heritage has a way of decaying over decades. There is never a precipitous step drop. So whether we like it or not, when I joined way back in early 90, they said mainframe technology will be obsolete by 1999. After that, everything will be heterogeneous, distributed client-server computing. When I last checked, the mainframe is only growing still. So it's been 30 years and it continues. Because as cool as new technology is, the inertia and the sunk cost of replacing old technology is horrendous. Nobody is printing cash to displace them. So we cannot pretend the old systems don't exist. And a lot of times, new technology adoption suffers not because of the inability of what it brings to the table, but for the fact that it has to, by definition, coexist with legacy. So how do you smartly allow for that integration?
And they don't know what will happen if you disrupt the legacy system. That is also
no C-suite person will willingly say turn off that server.
correct. Yes.
Because you don't know if customer XYZ or brand ABC is going to get impacted. And you can pay some rupees to find out impact analysis, but you will still be suspicious whether it has captured the last possible impact. That's just how spaghettied the systems are. You can't do much. Continuous learning, probabilistic determinism again, problem solving. New age metrics are bound to occur. I think like Sir hinted, outcomes are going to be a measure of success. Why bother about how many lines of code you churned out or how many, how much of residual defect density is there or what is your SLA or KPI. Your uptime is 99.49%. I mean, so what? When I was at the vendor and my payment gateway failed, it's an inconvenience. It probably didn't fall within your 99.999, but that outlier has lost you a payment customer. So I think that kind of thing. I think it's a team sport, this whole AI. There is no rock star, one individual who knows it all. If at all anything it teaches you humility, because what you know yesterday is not relevant today. So you have to keep grounded. Market churn is my last slide or two. I think chip to cloud, too much volume of investment has gotten. People are eagerly awaiting to see the ROI on this. So you'll have to play into that game. What exactly is the moat is yet to emerge. If everybody has access to infinite knowledge thanks to models, then how is your brand different? What is the moat? And it is rapidly getting adopted, yet rapidly getting commoditized as well. So you have to deal with that. Human knowledge moving away from labor getting outsourced, outtasked and commoditized. Some part of intellect or cognition, if not knowledge, is getting into models. So how do you deal with the digitization of information? First time right is always the holy grail, but you may not get first time right here. So how do you deal with an iterative sprint mindset rather than a first time right mindset? The body of standards, like IBM used to have gold standards, K-log, function points, productivity, this, that. This thing is moving so fast and such a fast moving target it is, that all of these are emerging and they are volatile as well. So they have to be codified. You'll have to deal with that. Velocity and acceleration plus density is much more important than pretending you can attain steady state. So be nimble and agile. It's volatile, but it's full of opportunity. So that's about it. Just some sharing of what I thought might be relevant to share. Any questions or thoughts? If somebody is saying they have a question, can't hear you though. Are they on audio?
People can put the question on the chat.
On chat, huh? It's a Teams call, is it? Webinar. There might be a question pane.
So with rapid adoption of AI across the vertical, domain experience becoming very critical in making
It's very true.
successful. Right? You emphasize multiple times also. From the service provider point of view, okay. So in earlier scenario, there is a lot of cards applications. It's a matter of, service provider's point of view, bringing the application, customizing to the environment of the domain what the consumers are using, then making it to happen. Most of it are, clearly documented, process oriented, design blueprints. So you follow that and make it happen. That's how it used to be.
Used.
Now, in the domain experience led engagement from the customer's point of view, service provider point of view, I see a change in the pattern where outsourcing is moving toward a more insourced approach.
Yeah.
Where the domain experience is more available to the internal team than with the external team. And it's not one project, two project they do, right? They do multiple journey that they kind of do with the AI-related adoption inside the specific vertical.
Yeah.
So the CXOs are thinking more on the insourcing as a better option to than to get an outsourcing model. Are you seeing this as a trend globally and in India?
Actually, I'm not seeing it as a trend, but certainly see it happening. Activity is happening. The biggest data point in that regard is the advent of GCCs and a huge spike in the number of GCCs that are getting commissioned. So there is some grain of truth to what you're saying. But if I were to rephrase your question to say, does it obviate the need for outsourcing altogether, both from a functional and engineering standpoint? At this point, the answer is no. It's still happening a lot. Services are getting farmed out. There could be certain customers where they feel, for reasons of proprietariness or for reasons of the fact that they're able to pick up such talent, they let the domain and the functional expertise reside in-house. In-house being in the HQ somewhere or in the GCC, and use the service provider only for non-functional tasks, ancillary. That is certainly there. But it is not a secular trend in my opinion. It's early days. But undoubtedly the headlines in terms of the spike in the number of GCCs in India the last 24 months, undeniably that is at an all-time high. What is interesting is, will model providers, because they have codified domain knowledge to some extent, will they emerge as a constituent or a player here? Or will cloud providers who host models become that? We don't know. We'll see. It's quite a, what you call, melting pot right now.
It's something like Amazon becoming a fintech. They started
Yeah.
doing everything now,
Yeah.
right from lending. It's a
Possible.
it's a shopping
Possible.
company. Now it just started. Banks are being threatened by Amazon.
Yeah. Or like it is popular to say, a car is a software on wheels. Right. So people have forgotten the importance of the chassis and the suspension and the mechanics of it. The first thing is, like when my car broke down last year, and I called the insurance, the first thing he asked is it a laptop car? So I said, what is a laptop car? He said, to diagnose what the problem is, we need to bring a laptop.
Yes.
And I said, no, pa, it's an old car only, don't worry. But like that. I think it's also quite fashionable to say every industry, especially traditional one, is now a AI driven or we don't manufacture this. We are actually software driven, this manufacturer, like that. And
say that service provider, we are managing certain services like technical support or call support. Knowing that the AI avatar could be a threat for the number of people I have deployed, because I'm deploying X number of people. Okay, I can, the configuration may change. You mentioned that. If an avatar is deployed to answer to certain calls and questions, that's what is emerging now. Now, will it not be prudent that I myself decide about if there is a potential change that is coming, then I will develop an avatar and I configure my own people so that I'm not taken by surprise by somebody offering that avatar and my number is
definitely
affected. Don't you think that
I think
company is offering me?
I didn't.
TCS has got a huge experience in that area.
Right.
I would like to know that.
No.
What would be my reaction to
Yeah.
that kind of a situation?
See, there are 2 or 3 thoughts I have in this regard. The risk of protracting the conversation. One is this famous book title from Andy Grove, Intel, Only the Paranoid Survive. And we know what's happening to Intel right now. The second is a theory posited by the late Professor Clay Christensen, which is the innovator's dilemma. And the third is this word called cannibalization. So all 3 hang off the same theme. If you don't innovate or question old ways of doing things and continue to perpetuate a legacy, some other person will figure it out, much to your detriment, and take your place eventually. So the innovator's dilemma is you're so busy sustaining your the sparkling nature of your current balance sheet that you're unwilling to cannibalize what contributes to it, and therefore, sadly, going to see the decline of it in the long term. Famous examples, recent ones: Nokia, Eastman Kodak, RIM BlackBerry. A very poignant example, the company that Netflix replaced in total, which is the Blockbuster company in US, which used to lend CDs. I was also a customer. I read an article about it, which was very profound but very simple. When you're in Blockbuster and you fail to return the CD on time because you didn't watch it or forgot or whatever, you're charged a penalty, a late fee. And Blockbuster therefore is incentivized for you not to watch its content. Because the longer you keep it and don't watch, the richer they become. Netflix was, you pay me this fee, all as you want, you watch this. Which means they are profiting off your propensity to watch rather than the misery of you forgetting to watch. Now you tell me which business model will win. It's quite obvious. Same way with cannibalization, if you don't keep the customer's interest in mind and say, I am providing you a state-of-art avatar or whatever, and I'll do it on my dime, because that is how you will continue to be wedded to me long term. And instead say, I will profit on your misery of dealing with a legacy way of interacting with me. Market forces will prevail. The market is very unemotional and totally unforgiving. So once those forces take over, you're not going to win that battle. So I think that's after that. Are there people on the call also? There are? Yeah? Yeah. So they can hear me, right? Should I check? They can? Okay, great. So normally I'm used to standing and talking. So this will be a little this thing. I look into the camera also here. But in terms of topics, yeah, thank you. Encumbrance into using an LLM, because a good old SQL will do the trick. So on and so forth. I think has to be thought through. It's an emerging area.
I said my AI will say,
Thought there's a traffic jam there.
Yes, exactly.
So the flip side of this is, the correlation and causation issue that we all have. But anyway, it's inevitable these things will happen. So really good.